You going to do it together, or okay, all right, good. And then once we've had that contribution, we'll move into Q's and A's. So Fiona.
Thank you very much, John, and thank you to the other speakers. Very, very stimulating. I'm Fiona, as John said, and we thought we'd give you a flavour of the headlines from the survey. We're going to do a double act here, so I shall ask Andrew to start us off. He's going to talk about what the main factors you said were on impacting on access and WP for the future.
So that was the question that we asked in the survey. What were the main factors, impact factors? There's not, I suppose, not much there to surprise most of us, and there was a relatively high consistency across the responses. 20 out of the 28, or two-thirds of the respondents, actually highlighted higher fees, students' fears about debts, and that whole area. Half the respondents really highlight the amount and the repetitive policy change that we've all experienced over the last few years. And, with apologies to Les, the kind of incoherence in policy, which perhaps he has to deal with more than we do. And then thirdly, the other main point that came out was about secondary information advice and guidance at secondary level, and that was connected up to poor information on student finance that was out there. So those were the main impact factors that people came up with, and one or two others were social disadvantage, poor aspiration, pleas for a sustained outreach programme, and the kind of unusual one in this, for me anyway, and I don't work in institutions like many of you do, was the one second from the bottom about the redeployment of WP staff. And there's a general feeling came through from the survey that staff who were in WP departments, if you like, were finding themselves actually working within marketing or within recruitment. And clearly there's the strengths of that, which we could see, but I think people were saying that there were some concerns that WP-specific skills, experience and knowledge were possibly going to be lost from that, and that WP might come to play sort of second fiddle to marketing or recruitment. Fiona?
Thank you. We've heard from Professor Beer what UK's priorities are for the sector, and that's essentially to try and see how we can fund an expansion. So what did you say were your top priorities? So you can see these varied, not surprising given the diversity of the sector, and the main focus was on the curriculum provision, delivery and support, picking up again the idea of information, advice and guidance, and this whole issue about collaboration and competition. Given the Office for Fair Access investigation into markets, I'm not surprised that this is one of the top priorities. It's certainly another agenda item that UK is focusing on at the moment. We also have some other areas that were picked up. Again, the importance, which I know is something that Professor Ebden has tried to push for a long time now, which is involving academics in wider participation. Again, an issue that we're all very familiar with, making sure that we can try and increase attainment levels in the pre-higher education sector. And again, longer-term planning of outreach. All of these are very similar to what Professor Ebden has talked about in terms of the strategy, which I think is very encouraging, so that clearly there's a synergy between what you are feeling are the top priorities and what Offer and HEFCE feel the top priorities. Interesting ones about funding, ring-fencing WP funding around staff and activity. I'd like to explore that a bit further, and exploring any institutional bias versus WP. Again, I think it would be helpful to try and unpick what's actually meant by that. Thank you.
So in terms of the top priorities there, you can see there was quite, there wasn't a kind of consensus, big consensus of what was, what the main impacts would be. When we asked about postgraduate study, then the 17 people that did respond all clearly and unequivocally said funding. And then again, just to pick up some of the comments around funding was clearly there's concerns about the follow-on debt from undergrad study. Clearly this is more critical if you come from a low-income background. Somebody said it would leave us in a situation where it's about ability to pay, not simply ability, in postgraduate study, and that postgraduate will be the playground of the better off. These are not mine or Action and Access's particular statements. These are obviously things that came out of the survey. And again, the follow-on effect will be that those from WP backgrounds, to use a simple term, will have greater trouble in accessing the professions, which Les mentioned, and postgraduate careers.
The next question was around challenges to fair recruitment. Quite a variety of different issues. Again, I'm sure they'll all be familiar to you. Recruiting staff trained in WP issues, better use of contextual admissions data. I'm very pleased that we have Janet Graham here from SPA, who will be talking about contextual admissions, and hopefully you've had a chance to read her paper. We also have Professor Beer here, who's the chair of SPA. Government policies on funding, we've heard quite a lot about that already. Effective, accurate targeting, again that refers to what Professor Ebden was talking about, being much more effective in what we do. Issues around socio-economic background, inflexible programme and learning offers, and consistency or transparency in recruitment.
We asked them a question, would you identify particular target groups as needing support? And the top of the list is mature and part-time, perhaps not surprising given a lot of the recent press. UK's own Power of Part-Time and the Part-Time Matters website. But the top of the list was mature and part-time. Interestingly, the question actually prompted several people to give answers something like the second one down, that the institution should be more broadly inclusive, which kind of opens up the kind of arguments or the tensions between targeting and working specifically with specific groups and actually trying to make your institution as inclusive as possible so everyone is included. So that's obviously not a target group, but it's interesting that it came up as one of the things that people were talking about. And the others, again, are probably ones that you would that you would imagine. I don't need to go through them. And also, at the end, there were a couple of comments that came out really that HEIs are mission specific, as Les was talking about, they're autonomous, and should identify their own target groups. So there's no one size fits all. And again, something from the heart from someone, that a student from a state school does not automatically count as a WP student. So when we're looking at participation and we're looking at what institutions say they're doing, you do need to differentiate, I think, perhaps from state school to state school.
Now, we turn to a more general question. What makes for better retention? And again, we received a variety of responses. Again, these reflect some of the responses we've had earlier, all about IAG and better preparation for students wishing to enter higher education. Or, and I should say, when you're looking at it from the within the institution, it's about having a curriculum that's accessible, that enables students to feel a sense of belonging and engagement, and having teaching and learning practices which are WP sensitive.
Okay, so just really in an attempt to summarise what the practitioners in this small sample told us were the critical factors and the issues for consideration. Again, as Fiona said a minute ago, they do echo very much what Professor Ebden was saying. That there's inadequate secondary and pre-entry information and guidance from schools, from government, possibly from HEIs. That there is very poor info on student fees and financial support, and the messages aren't getting through. that retention and success is as important as outreach. We've got to look at the whole student life cycle and look at what support and engagement we need from students. That there should be some curriculum change, more flexible provision and accessible curriculum, and obviously that's particularly, I suppose, linked to the next point, that there is now a renewed focus on mature and part-time study as the pool of applicants. But inevitably, coming across from the survey, it's socio-economic disadvantage, it's low aspiration, it's low prior achievement, that are the things we need to address, that are at the core of achieving a fair and representative participation. And obviously higher education providers are one of the number of players who are able to actually address these things. So I hope you found that interesting. It's obviously a very small sample. It's what people out there thought, and I think it does show a great similarity with the things that both our two speakers have been saying. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew and Fiona, and I think we should also thank all the people that took the time to provide that insight into kind of practitioners. So thank you to those people. I'm sure there's a number of people in the room that did that. Okay.